You know that feeling when your friend cancels plans last minute, and suddenly your whole Saturday feels a little too quiet? Multiply that by about 10,000. Strip away the electricity, the locks on your door, and every other human being for miles, and you're starting to get close to what it meant to be an ancient human, alone. Here's the thing. We love the lone wolf story. The rugged survivor, the solo caveman fighting off a saber tooth with a sharpened stick, thriving entirely on his own. It's a great movie poster. It's almost never what actually happened. So the real question is this. If you stripped an early human of their tribe, no group, no backup, no one to watch their back, how long would they actually last? And the answer is going to change how you think about what strong even means. Let's get the blunt version out of the way first. Solo survival, for most of human history, was a death sentence, and not a slow one. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy has argued for decades that humans are what's called cooperative breeders, meaning unlike most primates, human infants require so much sustained care that raising a single child essentially required an entire support network, not just two parents. That dependency didn't stop at childhood. It shaped the entire species. A lone adult human, cut off from the group, wasn't just lonely. They were missing the majority of the tools that kept them alive in the first place. But here's where it gets strange. It's not just about extra hands for hunting or gathering. Isolation appears to have been so dangerous to early humans that evolution built in psychological alarms specifically to prevent it. A well-known area of research led by social psychologist John Cacioppo, sometimes called the father of social neuroscience, found that chronic loneliness triggers measurable physiological stress responses. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, weakened immune function, essentially the same biological alarm system your body uses for physical danger. Cacioppo's argument was blunt. The human brain treats social isolation less like an inconvenience and more like an open wound, which makes sense, evolutionarily. If isolation reliably killed your ancestors, then feeling terrible about being isolated wasn't a design flaw. It was a warning label doing exactly its job. Now here's the part nobody talks about. Survival wasn't just physically harder alone. It was information poor. A tribe wasn't just muscle. It was a living, walking archive. Which plants were edible and which ones would kill you in 6 painful hours? Where the water source moved to during dry season. Which animal tracks meant easy meal and which ones meant leave immediately. None of that knowledge existed in a book. It existed in the heads of the people around you, refined over generations, and a single person, no matter how clever, simply couldn't rediscover all of it fast enough on their own before a single mistake killed them. Archaeologist Kim Hill, who has spent decades studying modern hunter-gatherer groups like the Aché of Paraguay, has documented just how staggeringly detailed and interdependent that shared ecological knowledge actually is. The kind of knowledge that takes an entire community, and often an entire lifetime, to fully absorb. But wait, weren't there any real exceptions? Any actual lone survivors? This is the fair pushback, and there is a genuinely fascinating answer to it. Yes, there are documented cases, though they're vanishingly rare, and they tend to prove the rule rather than break it. Perhaps the most famous is the story of Juana Maria, sometimes called the Lone Woman of San Nicolas Island, who reportedly survived completely alone on an isolated California island for around 18 years in the 1800s after the rest of her community was relocated. It's a remarkable case, but historical accounts describe her as skilled, resourceful, and already deeply trained in the ecological knowledge of her people before she was left behind. She wasn't a stranger improvising survival from zero. She was carrying an entire tribe's worth of knowledge inside her own memory, and she still spent nearly 2 decades in profound isolation before contact was reestablished. The exception doesn't disprove the theory. It confirms exactly how much prior tribal knowledge it actually takes to pull off surviving alone at all. So if solo survival was this brutal, this rare, and this dependent on borrowed knowledge, how did early humans avoid ending up alone in the first place? The answer is that the tribe wasn't just a support system for hard times. It was actively engineered, socially, emotionally, to prevent anyone from ever having to find out what alone really meant. Reciprocal altruism is the technical term anthropologists use for one of the most important survival strategies our species ever developed. The deeply ingrained instinct to share resources today, on the unspoken understanding that the favor gets returned later. Evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers formalized this idea back in the 1970s, showing how this kind of "you scratch my back now, I'll scratch yours during your bad season" system could evolve and stabilize in social species, humans very much included. In practice, that meant a hunter who came back empty-handed still ate that night because the tribe had food to spare and expected the same treatment when their own luck ran out. It wasn't charity. It was insurance, and everyone was quietly paying into it. This is the moment worth sitting with. A tribe remembers your name when you're sick. A tribe saves your portion when you're gone too long. A tribe searches the tree line when you don't come back by dark. No single hunter, no matter how strong, no matter how sharp their spear, ever outlasted a winter the way an entire fire circle could. Because strength, for most of human history, was never a solo statistic. It was a shared one. That reframes the whole rugged individual myth pretty completely, doesn't it? The version of ancient humanity that actually made it, that actually spread across ice ages, deserts, and oceans, wasn't the loner. It was the cooperator. The person who shared the kill even when they didn't have to. The person other people trusted enough to leave their child with for an afternoon. Evolutionary anthropologist Michael Tomasello has spent much of his career arguing that this exact trait, the human drive toward shared intentionality, toward genuinely working together toward a common goal, might be the single biggest cognitive difference between humans and even our closest primate relatives. Chimpanzees are plenty smart. They're just not nearly as good at trusting each other. And this dependency shows up in some surprisingly specific places. Consider punishment. In most tribal societies studied by anthropologists, the worst penalty a person could face wasn't execution. It was exile, being cast out. Sent away from the fire, the food stores, the shared knowledge permanently. And that tells you everything about how ancient humans actually ranked their fears. Death was terrifying, sure, but banishment, being made to survive completely alone, was so widely treated as equivalent to a death sentence that many cultures barely bothered distinguishing between the two punishments at all. Here's a strange modern echo of all this. Solitary confinement, one of the harshest punishments still used in prisons today, produces psychological effects, anxiety, hallucinations, a measurable decline in cognitive function, that researchers studying isolation describe as some of the most severe mental deterioration documented in modern psychology. We didn't invent the fear of isolation in modern times. We just built a system that occasionally deliberately triggers a 100,000-year-old alarm. So no, an ancient human almost certainly could not survive long, or well, entirely alone. Not because they were weak. Because the entire species was built, cell by cell and instinct by instinct, to function as a collective organism rather than a set of scattered individuals. Your ancestors who tried to go it alone mostly didn't get the chance to have descendants. The ones who did are the reason you exist. And that means, whether you like it or not, cooperation isn't just something humans learn to do. It's quite literally in your blueprint. Which brings it back to your canceled Saturday, your suddenly too quiet apartment, that small, nagging discomfort of being alone longer than you'd planned. That feeling isn't oversensitivity. It isn't weakness, and it definitely isn't something modern and soft about you. It's an alarm bell forged over hundreds of thousands of years by ancestors for whom isolation wasn't a mood. It was a countdown clock. You feel lonely for the same reason you feel thirsty. Because your body says trying urgently to get you back to the people who keep you alive. We didn't survive the ice ages, the predators, or the famines because any one of us was strong enough alone. We survived because none of us ever really had to be.